Thank you very much. I always wanted Wiley to be the publisher that was going to publish this book. In fact, I dreamt that Wiley would be the publisher to publish this book. And thank you so much for seeing it through the publishing and the commissioning stages so well. It was fabulous. Thank you for all coming here tonight to celebrate this very, very special occasion. It really is something that I never thought would actually happen. In fact, the last book I self-published, you probably remember, which was a wonderful book of 20 little caricatures of leaders. It's still one of my favorite things I've done, but this one is a real grown-up one. So thank you so much for coming along to celebrate tonight. There are a lot of people that I do need to thank for the publishing of this book. Don't worry, I won't thank all of them, but I must mention a few of the plethora of proofreaders that we actually had involved in this, starting with my lovely wife, Jane. Janie thought she was going to Portugal last summer for a break. That was not to be the case whatsoever, as I turned up with 200 pages of manuscript for her to read through. My darling daughter, Emily, who actually found typos and grammatical errors that really no one else would have possibly found. There was a very good friend, Catherine Mathers, who recommended that culture change was so important to this topic that it became a completely separate section. And so thanks to her, part 3, entitled Culture Change, is now a completely separate section and key to the actual book. I'd also like to thank an agent called Arthur Goodhart, who read several chapters of the book and made me take one of the chapters that was buried right down at the back and move it all the way down to the forward, to the front of the book, because it set the context for the entire book. So now part 0, Change is Inevitable, is actually is key to the book, and I must dedicate that to Arthur. But most thanks goes to the man flu that poleaxed Carlos Sabaguero when he was on business in the US. He was holed up in a room for 3 days, had nothing else to do but to read the entire manuscript from front cover to back. And the unending suggestions that came from Carlos included one blinding glimpse of the obvious, and that was you forgot to sum the book up. So chapter 35, which is now entitled, and finally, Tell Them What You Told Them, is definitely dedicated to Carlos. And the other 4 CEOs who provided comments for me to use on the front, back, and websites various. So the truckloads of used fivers, particularly now that they're illegal, will be on their way to you. Now, the book can be summed up with one phrase, and it's written here: change is inevitable, successful change isn't. Now, Benjamin Disraeli, about 150 years ago, said change is inevitable, change is constant. But the change that we have all seen since he uttered those prophetic words would leave him utterly, absolutely gobsmacked. In the last 100 years, the change we've seen is very dramatic. In the last 50 years, the change we've seen would blow our minds, and we've all coped with it. The change we've seen in the last 20 years is even more dramatic, but it is nothing compared to the change that we are about to see in the next 20 years. Those of us that will cope with that change will survive. Those of us who will seek out and embrace that change, well, they will thrive. Change has never been more prevalent and more relevant. In fact, voters around the world, as we have seen in every country that we can think of that's had an election in the last 18 months, are all voting for change, any change, sometimes at any cost. Change is critical, but it's not just critical in life to be able to cope with it, it's critical in business. Because if you want your next change initiative to be one of the 8 that actually succeed, you are going to help your people seek out and embrace change, because that's the statistic. 88% of change fails. Let me just pause to let that sink in. 88% of change initiatives fail. I lifted that from a fantastic little survey from Bain & Co. 18 months ago. And other consultancies can argue about the percentages, but fundamentally the vast majority of change initiatives fail to deliver the outcomes they set out to achieve. Interestingly, the same proportion of strategies, of mergers and acquisitions also suffer the same fate. They fail to deliver what they set out to achieve. 88% of change fails. So the obvious question is why? Why does change fail? And that's what part 1 of this book is dedicated to answer. And the key reason is that we hate change. We humans just hate change, particularly in the world of business. We like to cling on to the status quo. We fear that tomorrow may not be as good as it is today. We don't trust our change leaders. We don't believe our change leaders that the future is going to be any better. We fear. In fact, we're encompassed with fear. We fear that we might be blamed for how things currently are. We fear that if we try and fail, we will be blamed for that failure, and we fear the consequences of that failure. That's the key reason why change fails. But there's a lot of other reasons. I won't go through all of them, but they do include a lack of clarity about what we're trying to achieve and why, a lack of understanding of the implications of the change, and also leadership who actually forget to stay the course. But one of the key reasons is that we forget that emotions trump logic every single time. As David Cameron amply demonstrated during his disastrous campaign to remain in the EU last year, logic alone is not a powerful enough motivator. To follow a leader, you've actually got to be motivated emotionally. In fact, emotion is 4 times stronger than logic as a motivation tool. And that survey and the details of that survey is also in the book. Emotions rule our decisions. Those people that voted to leave the EU did so with valid and highly emotional reasons. They're not bad reasons, they're just full of emotion. Some people voted to leave the EU because they literally felt they had nothing to lose. They had been left behind by globalization, and they have been ignored by countless generations of politicians. Some people voted to leave the EU because they wanted to be free of the expensive and bureaucratic yoke of Brussels, a valid reason, and one imbued with emotion. They wanted to take back control of our borders. And as a self-confessed immigrant, I won't tell you what my comments on that one is. But the fourth one is equally emotional, the patriotic reason that we believe that Britain, to steal Donald Trump's meaningless but rather catchy phrase, could be great again. Every one of those reasons are valid, and every one of those reasons are emotion-driven. And as I said, that's not a bad thing. We've got to remember that. As change leaders, we have got to motivate our people emotionally if we want them to actually deliver the change that we are setting out to deliver. And that's what part 2 is about. It's all about what are the essential ingredients to successful change. So it flipped part 1 on its head and says, well, how do we do this? How do we be the one innate change that actually succeeds? And there are a whole bunch of reasons, a bunch of ways of being able to do this. They include being very, very clear about what you're trying to achieve and, more importantly, why. They include fully understanding the implications of the change. They include genuine communication and genuine engagement. And I use the word genuine, I underline it twice, because very, very rarely are change communications genuine. Very rarely do change leaders engage properly with their people and emotionally with their people to get them not on board with the change, but to get them to a state where it's their change and they willingly want to accept it. But there are 2 essential ingredients to successful change that I really want to highlight tonight. One is the title of the book, and that's the appointment of a change catalyst. So what is a change catalyst, I hear you ask? Well, I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't a project manager. It isn't a program manager, and it isn't a part-time executive. It's a business person that sits between the leadership and the employees, and ideally is a trusted confidant of both of them. It's a person who is obsessed with outcomes. It's a person whose role it is to deliver the outcomes that this change requires. A project manager, their role is to deliver the process, to make sure the process is followed. There's a great phrase that I do use in the book. I don't know where it came from. I'd love to think I made it up. I probably didn't. And it's that the operation was a complete success. Unfortunately, the patient died. With a change catalyst, the patient will live. Otherwise, it's not a successful operation whatsoever. So when you're instigating sustainable change, you're going to need both, because the change catalyst is the yin to the program manager's yang. You must have both. The other secret to successful and sustainable change that I'd like to share tonight is the development of a change-ready culture. Culture is everything. Well, so said Louis Gerstner of IBM. He was half right, and I'll get to that in a second. But culture is very important. Without a change-ready culture, your change will not succeed. Your people are already scared. They're already afraid that they're going to be blamed for the way things currently are. They're already wondering if they could just wallow in their victimhood. They're already wondering whether they could. They're already afraid that they might change and fail and the consequences of that failure. They will need an environment where they are able to try and fail and move on. They need an environment where it's open to question the status quo. It's okay to think of new ways of doing things and suggest that maybe the leadership could be doing X, Y, and Z rather than A, B, and C. It's an environment where it's okay to have new processes, to suggest new ways of doing things, maybe even new structures. A change-ready culture is a key ingredient to successful change. Culture is almost everything. It certainly is part 3 of the book, thanks to Catherine. It's an entire section. We talk about culture change, which I liken to teaching people how to walk in the rain. To understand that, you'll have to read part 3. I talk about change in a foreign culture. We also talk about the relatively new concept of cultural intelligence, which is worth a read. But part 4, the penultimate chapter, is really where I sort of get down to business, if you like, and talk about what does a good strategy look like. Also talk about what a bad strategy looks like. I go through my strategy framework. Also talk about execution, strategy execution, because execution is everything. This is where Louis Gerstner got it slightly wrong. Execution is everything. To execute, you need a change-ready culture. So he was half right. Execution is so important. It doesn't matter how clever, how innovative, or how expensive your strategy might be. If your organization is not ready, willing, and able to deliver it, it's a complete waste of time. In that chapter, we also talk about what does an extraordinary leadership team look like and how to create one. We talk about things like mission, mission, and other buzzwords. And perhaps my favorite chapter in the whole book, which I entitled Values Schmalues. Now, I've spent 30 years watching organizations spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money constructing wonderful, shiny new corporate values, proudly displaying them in their annual report, and even hanging them from the ceiling at times to greet the staff as they alight from the lifts every morning. And most of the time, that's been a complete waste of time. I've had an epiphany when I was writing this chapter. And the epiphany was this. In fact, I defined epiphany as a blinding glimpse of the obvious that I hadn't thought of before. There are 3 types of values. One is your brand values. Now, what are they? Well, I'll tell you what they're not. They're not what your CEO says they are. They're not what your marketing director says they are. They're what your customers say they are. That's fairly obvious, but let's state it anyway. Your brand values are what your customers think they are. Your corporate values, they're not what you put in your annual report most of the time. They're not what the CEO thinks they are. They're what your staff thinks they are. That's what your corporate values actually are. And there's a lot about that in the book and some really good examples. And the third one are your aspirational values. They're the ones you put in your annual report. They're the ones you hang from the ceiling. But no company I've ever seen or heard of describes them in that fashion. They pretend they're real. And the staff look at them and go, that's not how it works in real life. So there's your 3 values. If you were to look at your values through those 3 lenses, then I believe you would have a strategy that is robust. You would have a culture that is robust, real, and genuine that everyone believes in, and it would be aligned to deliver your strategy. And you would then also have financial performance that would inevitably follow. In the penultimate chapter, I also talk about 5 detailed case studies. Now, the first one is on globalization, a perfect example of how not to instigate change. The second one is a really good example of a quite brilliant HR transformation because it was done by Lisa Winnard. Lisa and I did at Sesame, and it's really worthwhile looking through. And then 3 examples of change catalysts who have changed entire industries. One of them is Tim Wallace of iPipeline, who has completely transformed the US life insurance industry. Secondly, and you need to know this company. This is Michael Gould of Anaplan. If you hadn't heard of them, you need to. They're not transforming one company. They're transforming entire industries. They enable CEOs and leadership teams to be able to get rid of their disparate spreadsheets and make real-time decisions and conduct what-if analysis and basically make better business decisions. They are the UK's newest unicorn, a tech company worth over $1 billion, well worthwhile getting to know. They are exploding at the moment. And I think Pascal's here tonight. And the last change catalyst, is Michael Sheargold, of the Real Estate Results Network in Australia, who is transforming the entire real estate industry in Australia, not through getting rid of agents, which everyone else seems to be doing, but by helping agents to transform themselves into customer service-oriented business people. So good old training, coaching, and mentoring. It's amazing how much that can actually work. And then, of course, part 5 wraps it all up, thanks to Carlos, and finally, you tell them what you've told them. Now, the Change Catalyst isn't a textbook, although it would make a handy companion guide for MBA programs. He says, not looking at Jack from the Judge MBA school in Cambridge over here. It's also not an ordinary business book because actually it's really good to read. It's actually quite fun to read. It's easy to read. It's chock full of tools, methodologies, and I hope you agree it's full of really good insights as well. But the most important thing about the book is it's for sale tonight. So thank you all very, very much for coming. But no, thank you all very much for coming. And please stay around, continue to fill your glasses, and thank you for helping me to wet my new baby's head. Thank you.